Would that be right?
Yeah, it's an interesting timing because I mean it's after a dozen or so years there. I think it's probably after that. You know, we had an ordinary vintage in 2006, but we had a consecutive vintages from 2007 onwards that were exceptional. I think around that, probably the 2010 mark, and after that, especially in Chardonnay, a lot of our learnings, or my learnings, were really kicking in around that time.
Right.
And that could really see the wine start to take off from that 2010.
So was it a function of the vines as well? Was it a function of that sort of critical time period when the vines were just getting to a level of maturity and they were really starting to sing? Was that a part of it?
Yeah, well, a lot of the vineyards in Margaret River, you know, excluding the real core Willie Abrupt older plantings in the 70s, were planted in the early to mid 90s. Yeah. So you're looking at them really kicking into semi-maturity after about that 15, 20 years. So that was a function of those vines stabilising and maturing, and then just having consecutive vintages under my belt from the same vineyards and the same fruit, the same blocks, etc. So, you know, those learnings, you know, you had a few wins and losses on the way through each vintage, experiment as much as you can, but then really repeating vintages in those same vineyards just to fine tune as we go along. And I've still got almost all of the vineyards I started with in 2001, we've still got. So, And
I was reading that you guys, it's not all one area in the vineyard. You have various vines scattered around, is that right? So it's not just one collision of vines. Well,
if you look at the map of Margaret River, it's a huge region. It's 100 kilometres north to south and about 50 kilometres east to west. Yeah. So we're the only brand in Margaret River that has vineyards throughout those extremities and within. So we can really source, you know, from year in, year out. We're really getting the flavour spectrums from the northern parts, eastern, western, southern, matching those to varieties, clones, and different timing of pickings to get those different flavours.
So the fruit's never blended at the same time. It's actually it's matured separately and then blended back. Is that your process?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Got it.
Even Savvy Blanc and that sort of thing, we pick at different times to get different flavour profiles, and all varieties we really aim to keep blocks separate, let alone, you know, individual varieties as well.
One of the things that I picked up in the reading was, and I'd never realised this, and so to badly misquote Donald Trump, who constantly uses this phrase, some people wouldn't know this, but which usually indicates that he never knew it. But I understand that there's three distinct weather patterns that intersect in the Margaret River area. There's the north, the south, and the southwest. And the three of them have very specific different impacts on the actual growing process.
Yeah, it's massively maritime influence. Again, you look at the map and the whole region juts out. So we've got ocean influence in the north around Geograph Bay.
Yep.
The whole west coast is Indian Ocean influenced, and then you get down to the southern part of the region, and that's the Southern Ocean. So
and obviously, lending different influences at different times of the day and year.
That's right.
If it's anything like Stellenbosch and such. Okay, exactly. Quite excited to check these out. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that 2016 Margaret River was far from an easy year in terms of rain. You got heaps of rain in January, but from what I can see, Margaret River came to the rescue at the last critical 6-week period and evened things out for you and created a fantastic vintage, particularly for your Chardonnay.
Yeah, it's funny. In January each year, we do get some tail ends of cyclones that come down from the north, and 9 times out of 10 they cut across and misses to the east. But this one in 16 dumped about 70 to 80 mil during that early ripening period in Chardonnay. I think the thing that really saved us was that it all dumped in 1 to 2 days, a very short time.
It was done and dusted.
And then find out the winds came in and cleared everything up. But that year in 16, we were about 30% down in yield, so we had a really early harvest that year as well. So the fruit didn't hang on the vine after that rain event.
It seems though that you guys pulled some magic tricks out, because looking at the other super premium Chardonnays for that year, they didn't perform, certainly if you're looking at purely on the ratings, they didn't perform nearly as well as you guys appeared to have done for 16. So
yeah,
something magical going on there.
Oh, I mean, the vineyard that drives the reserve is a special little vineyard, and it's something we pick early, and is naturally low disease pressure in the vineyard. There's a lot of wind that goes through the vineyard. It's an early harvest. It doesn't hang out and get that botrytis pressure, and you're stressing about actually getting full ripeness. And
so it had a predisposition to early harvest anyway, that particular
exactly.
plot. Oh, so perfect for that year. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very good that year, yeah.
It's interesting, sort of nosing the Chardonnay over the last 20 minutes or so. When it first came out of the fridge, I was getting that hint of struck match, which too much of it is really horrid. And there was just gentle notes of it, but now it seems to have dissipated as the wines got warmer. Living where we live here in Singapore, things warm up really quick. I'd say that this wine is probably at 15 degrees now, and it was at about 11 when it came out of the fridge. It's quite a journey. There's a beautiful laciness about the wine. There's something really genteel and delicate about the nose, which is so glorious. There's so much on there that sort of smacks you about the chops. What was the oak treatment with it? Was it all secondary French?
Well, it's a good question. We moved about 8 years ago to, it's been all French oak in the time I've been there, so for 20 years. What we have moved in the last 8 years or so is the 500 litre puncheons. We really try and get that magical balance of complexity but retaining freshness and brightness, and it's kind of hard to achieve that without.
My immediate thought on this was, if you'd thrown a bunch of American oak into this, it would have just completely lost the finesse and the nuance of it. It's just so on the money from an oak point of view. It really is terrific.
We've done a lot of work with the Coopers as well in terms of the toasting levels in the puncheons. So one, they're larger format, so a more subtle influence. But the toasting regime, we've gone lighter, but if you go too light, you get quite a phenolic structure. So you still got not going into the charriness, but just where it starts to get to that fresh toast, the roasted spice aromatics, but only about 20% new. So our best performing barrels are actually 1 year old puncheons from D&J, Transvar Frere. So they're absolutely gold.
So you have a history of using just one cooperage, you source from the same people. Is that the way, or do you shop around from an oak point?
Yeah, we trial every year. So you only get one vintage a year, and we trial on Chardonnay, Shiraz, and Cabernet mainly, and a little bit of Merlot and Malbec. But we have our core coopers. We have 9 coopers that we work with, and within Chardonnay we have about 3 different oak types within those coopers. So we're over 20 different oak types within our entire winemaking. But doesn't sound, it sounds a lot, but compared to some makers, it's they can get into 50, 60, 70 and really go out. But we'd really rather stick with really well seasoned, consistent wood, and then fine tune the seasoning and the toasting to match our wines.
For me, the acids come through really beautifully. There's this spectacular line of acid all the way through. It reminds me, it's so clear and so pure, it reminds me a little bit of the higher altitude Centro Targan Chardonnays or something like that. It's got that granite, that schist granite component to it, that sort of element of crunch, that if I had this in a blind, I'd really sort of go off in that direction completely. I'd never attribute this to a more maritime climate.
It's a good call. And if you look at the Chardonnays back sort of pre-2010 even, we were renowned for getting quite voluminous, powerful core fruited Chardonnays, and you generally lack that line and that balanced acidity to really support it, even as it ages as well. And that comes down to, it's easy to pick early, but if you haven't got the flavour there to support the acidity, then
it's a nebbish. It's a wash.
this vineyard we work with that drives the wine, we actually get those early flavours still with 8-9 grams of acidity in the wine. So it's a really unique vineyard that's got flavour, that's sort of sub 12 BMA, and then it's got that real line of acidity as well.
Yeah, just perfect balance, really super. Mate, so what do you see in terms of cellaring for something like this? I'm really excited. The acid structure is so fine that I would call it 10-year view on it. Would that be right? Or?
Yeah, well, Sam was saying before, he's tasted 2012 or 13, and I think this is a similar sort of wine, probably with a bit more acid line to it. So you're looking at, you know, the 12's about 8 years of age. So, I mean, the 12's drinking beautifully now still, along with the 13. So I think that magic 8 to 12 years of age for this wine. So just as I probably start seeing this kicking into a bit of secondary in another 2 years or so, and that's when I love drinking them, or at that 6 to 8 years of age. Still got some primary, but still got that little bit of bottle maturation and a little.
Did we just get lucky with our buying to get the 16 at this stage? Because most of WA is a little younger.
I was actually surprised. I don't think it's not even released the cellar door.
No, it's not the cellar door.
Ash hasn't got the cellar door yet, so I don't know how you got it. But honestly, it's and with the 98 points with Halliday, it's just like
just astonishingly
demand,
good.
Yeah,
So,
very surprised.
So what would your production have been of this? You say it was a lower year, so about 15% down. So how many cases would you put out of this in total?
We do about 300 cases, so 10 barrels.
Oh, that's tiny. Again, we're really lucky to get what we got. That gives me plenty to crow about when I talk about it online. It's really awesome.
At the end of the day,
I just bought some more today.
Oh, excellent. I always say there's nothing better than telling a customer we've sold out.
And it's interesting because the follow-up vintage, the 17, it was a cooler year as well, whereas the 18 is a more voluminous year. So I'm talking internally about the next release actually being the 18 instead of the 17.
And hold the 17 back. That's amazing.
And doing the 18. So we're about 10 months away from making that decision, but I think that's how it's panning out. And we'd be the first, I think, in Margaret River to actually do that. I mean, I'm a huge fan of 17. I've drunk a fair bit of the usual suspects out of that part of the world, the Cullens, the Loon, and what have you. I kind of like the finesse and the poise of what's coming out. So, I mean, for me, probably my favorite years for Shardy from your part of the world, 10, 12, 17 are probably the three in sort of my liver's living memory, the ones that I like the most. But you've definitely pulled out something awesome with this one. It's really cool.
Matt, I'll jump in. Sorry, it's Lou. Hi. Right. The Redbrook estate itself, can you talk me through that and how you classify the reserve versus the just the estate thing? As the buyer for the company, it's a little bit dizzying when I go on your site, I must admit, and look at all the various ranges you have at every price point. It gets rather confusing at times. So you've got the Redbrook, and then you've got the Redbrook Reserve. So first of all, is Redbrook itself a sub-region or a vineyard or a block, or how is it? And then how do you then differentiate the reserve from your estate offering?
Well, Redbrook is a vineyard, so it's the home. We're here at Redbrook now, Salvador, so it's a physical site.
Right.
And historically, it's been the top example wines out of the Evans and Tate stable. So the top red and top Chardonnay. So now, pre-2000, it could have been a blend. So quite often it was a Cabernet, Merlot, Shiraz, or even a Merlot dominant blend. But as of 2000, it's the top Cabernet of the year is the Redbrook Red. And then the white is the Chardonnay, which it has been for over 20 years.
So is it a barrel selection process or
it's driven by two? Yeah, the two biggest differences is the vineyards, and the release dates. So you're looking at a 16 just released 2016 reserve, and the estate at the moment we're getting onto the 18. So there's always a 2 to 3 year difference between the reserve and the estate and their release dates. Right. So Rob was talking about, you've got these finer, more bony, flinty vineyards that go into the reserve wine that take longer to actually hit the mark and open up. Whereas in the estate, the earlier release Chardonnay, we're looking at more lower acidity, more stone fruit flavour profile, fleshier, more voluptuous Chardonnay style that you probably expect from Margaret River. So the vineyards are different, the release date's different, which is driven by the vineyards, and it captures the two very different styles that are.
And is that in terms of the vineyard, is that a selection process, or is it? I mean, because you've got the Redbrook block, I assume, and then do you select what barrels to put to reserve, or is it specific sub blocks of Redbrook that you allocate to reserve?
They're actually totally different vineyards. So we've actually got in the Redbrook estate wine, for instance, down adjacent properties, we've actually got other parcels on other vineyards as well. So we'll target those towards the say the estate wine that are in that flavour profile, and they'll go into different oaks. So we'll actually use a little bit of barrique oak, the 225s, into the estate. Whereas I was talking before about the 500 litre puncheons, those finer vineyards will go into the 500 litre puncheons. So you're right, different vineyards, different harvesting times, different oak regime, very similar ferment management. So we'll do it's all wild, all our Chardonnays. I do 8 Chardonnays, and we're all wild in those Chardonnays. But there's no malo in either of those wines either, so there's retain that tightness and freshness, I think. And then they're released very differently. The estate a lot earlier because it's more voluptuous, round palate profile, whereas a reserve needs that time in terms of opening up to a couple more years of bottle age. So you'll see it if you get, say, on the shelf, you'll see that vintage difference straight away. And then if you open both of them up at the same time, you'll see that massive style difference between the two wines as well.
Different personalities completely.
Yeah. But you're right, I make over 40 wines, and it's awesome. Twice a year I open them all up and they go, oh, thank God they look different. But then that's going back to the vineyard and making sure that.
You must go mental during harvest time. I mean, your entire sort of harvest period, how long is that? Sort of 6 weeks or something? Or
it can go up to three months, but it's got that 6 to 8 weeks of real core intake harvest.
Got it. Yeah. Crazy time. I've learned not to talk to winemakers anywhere close to that time of year.
I live with winemakers during harvest.
I remember one year I was helping. I was a disaster, but I was kind of trying to be part of the harvest in Marlborough, and the winemakers were just impossible. They were just, but I get it. I totally get it. I mean, everything's on the line for such a short
period. I've gone past that.
All right, let's take a look at the Cabernet. So 2010, gorgeous year. Jeremy Oliver talks about 2010 being nearly perfect for whites, and that's not a compliment he dishes out too easily. And he says that the reds in 2010 were almost as good. So that was a really high call. I looked at a couple of other vintage reports. It seemed like it was certainly as a vintage on the money. I couldn't find anything on your site in terms of your interpretation of the vintage. So maybe you want to kick off there, Matt.
Yeah, I think when you look at the 2010s, it's a good call. I mean, we came off a very special 9 and 8 and a warmer 7, which was very similar to the 18. And 10, I think when you look at 10 in that magical 10-year vertical of Cabernets, the tannin profile, which I think separates the better or best years of Margaret River, because we do have some very good ones, but it elevates it to one of those very good years from the fineness and ripeness of the tannins.
Yep.
And it's funny because when you think low yield, you think high quality, but that year wasn't a super low yielding year, it wasn't super high. But what it does when it's got that really magical sort of balance around that 4 to 5 tonnes a hectare, so it slows up the rate of ripening, so you can get that tannin ripeness to catch up with the sugar and flavour development.
Gotcha.
So when they have really low yields, you sort of race sugar-wise to ripeness, but your tannins are lagging behind. But in 10, you have this lovely balance of fruit on the vine where the tannins were keeping up with the sugar ripeness, and at harvest it just that fine integrated tannin we got.
What's really cool about the wine, how it's looking tonight, is this fusion. All the elements are together. The tannins are glossy and just beautifully interpreted right now. Nothing seems to stand out, and for me that's always something that I lean into when I taste the wine, is to try to find a wine where everything is harmonious and you're not picking up any kind of extraneous component to it. And I think it only really happens at this sort of magical 10-year period, and it's had a decade now, and it's just
showing right. And Ash and I've talked about Cabernet, and whenever you recommend a cellaring time, it's almost impossible. But if I had to narrow it down to a little window when I like to drink Margaret Cabernet, it's that around about 8 years for a typical year, but in the best years, more 8 to 10. Because we've still got some primary in here, but you're starting to get some really lovely secondary.
It's sort of that magical influence when you've got primary and secondary all happening at the same time. You're not giving up the fruit freshness, but you've got some gravitas coming through as well. Yeah. It's at a really, really beautiful time. We sold the last of it about a week ago, and
I was going to say, I'm surprised. He must have got a palate destined for, I don't know, destined to sell a door or something.
Yeah. You've got a gentle touch.
I don't know what happened in my last order. I think we ordered all this stuff in January, and everyone must have been asleep because I ended up getting vintages I didn't ask for.
Oh, really?
And today when I was after whatever the current release was. But at the time I was ordering via the McWilliams thing, because you guys had arrangement, so I think a lot was getting lost in translation with what the trouble they were having. Anyway, I thought I'd ask Elise today as I was putting in my next order, just for a sneaky top up. She just laughed. She said, I don't know how you got it in the first place. You shouldn't have it.
No.
It's only museum stock, you're not getting any more. So that was it.
Well, that's the thing. This is the one where it's only these. 2010 is I started hand bottling myself magnums just with the Cabernet back in 2010, and this was a year that sort of triggered it. Was these very, very good vintages, and I only do about 40 or 50 each time. So it's a bit of an indicator of what I think are the very, very good Cabernet vintages.
I think what's a major thumbs up on this wine, Matt, is you read the tasting notes, what other people have found, obviously 5 years ago or what have you, when they first looked at the wine, that everything is so in balance in this wine. Everything is so in sync at the exact right time. Nothing stands out. It's really quite mystifying. I'm loving it. And, sometimes I have this sense of loss when I see the last bottle of wine selling on the site. And when this last bottle went last week, I thought, I haven't tasted it yet. I've got a feeling I'm going to regret that. And I am now. This is just amazing.
It's very, I think that my Chardonnay winemaking, it sort of comes across into the reds.
Oh, really?
We use a lot less new oak again in the reds, but we use, and we don't use extra fine grain that requires 2 years plus in barrel to actually mature the wine.
Yep.
So I think you lose freshness if you use that really tight grain that requires a longer maturation time in barrel. So we use a tight grain that you start getting the benefits around about 14, 15 months, but you're still retaining perfume and freshness in the wine.
There's probably traces. There's maybe traces of purple flowers, maybe some violets or something, but it's so genteel and soft and on the money at the moment. It's really, really amazing. And you see another 5 or 8 years out on this?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the past performers, the best vintages prior to that, I mean, I'm looking at the 8, the 4, and they're quite similar. The 4 still drinking beautifully, and I'm probably putting it a notch above the 4. So you're looking at that, 15, 20 years on the right cellaring. So obviously, if you're liking those secondary flavours, but you get lots of black olive character and that briary notes in there.
Yeah. Really
got a long life ahead of it, It's 10 years now, so it needs to go another 10, I think.
Well, maybe we can arm wrestle you to come back once the 18s the Chardonnay's ready for release, and whatever manages the spirit out of you.
For sure. See if I had a win there.
Cabernet.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
He's got a real talent for that. But maybe we can maybe compare. I'm not sure when the new stuff arrives, but maybe we can compare.
Well, I just ordered today, but we've got more of the 16 Cabernet and the 16 Chardonnay coming.
Chardonnay. Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, nice.
So I've got both of those coming. What else?
Again, we make a very small amount of the Cabernet, so if you like that, grab some to sell it.
There's no doubt that when our clients taste this 10, they're going to become long-term buyers of the brand. There's no question about it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
it's superlative. It's really, really great.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you dropping in, and I will be in touch. We've got a huge amount of other Evans stuff. I'm going to wrap my head around how we can package it up and do a little bit of that online as well with you guys. And I'll be in touch and see what we can figure out.
Yeah, awesome. Brilliant.
Thanks so much, and we'll be in touch again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay.